It is the practice of a theory that gives its ultimate value. The more a theory is applicable, the more benefits you can derive from it in our daily lives, the more it will be valued. The same way you can make Islam work. You have to seek the benefits, you have to make it practical, applicable, and it works. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. So we're in chapter 3, the Islamic paradigm. I was going to the first section, which is how to establish a scientific theory. And the goal again was to compare the establishment of a scientific theory to establishment of faith. So first, with the establishment of a scientific theory, I specified 3 criteria. One is the origin. The other is the relevance, like the theory has to be relevant to the world you experience. And the third, I called it utility, the usefulness, the benefits you can derive from that theory, from that view of the world. So going through utility. So the value of a theory comes from its relevance, which is itself a combination of multiple factors, like simplicity, logic, and descriptive and predictive powers. But in practice, we have seen previously the overall acceptance of a theory will mostly depend on its usefulness. A theory can be considered to be true, to give a scientifically more accurate description of the world, without being recognized by the general public, or even by certain scientific communities. The value of a theory is judged in relation to the benefits material in our materialistic society that it provides to the one who uses it. So for example, in the scientific realm, the laws of hydrodynamics makes it possible, for instance, to simulate the flow of water at the outlet of the tap. Like you turn your tap on, the water flows. And you can use hydrodynamics to explain how it flows exactly. The interaction between the water, the pipe, could be done much more precisely using quantum mechanics, for example. You can even explain what are the interactions between 2 different molecules of water. But from a practical point of view, we don't need it. Classical hydrodynamics is way sufficient for the engineer. On the other hand, quantum theory is largely ignored by the general public because, although it's closer to the truth, here truth in the sense, it allows to describe more accurately the interactions between all the atoms constituting the water, the pipe, the valve, etc. This knowledge brings little benefits to the lay person. This example shows that to be a plumber, you don't need quantum mechanics. Even hydrodynamics is already quite a high expectation. You don't really need it. If you know how it works and if you know how to fix it, that's enough. You don't really need to understand how it works at the core. To give another example, it's like your cell phone. You can use your cell phone without even knowing how it works, how the CCD or the CMOS of your camera works. You don't need all this. If it works, it's enough. If you know how to use and click an app and text, that's what you're looking for. You don't need to go in such depth. So here the 2 theories, classical mechanics and quantum mechanics, are therefore both considered to be valid. They are both valid, but in their own context. We'll say that classical mechanics is an approximation of maybe quantum mechanics at larger scale, at everyday scale. The first becomes a simplified version of the later, but each retain their utility, their usefulness. To give another example, it's like when you're learning what matter is. You learn about molecules, about atoms, and then if you want to represent an atom, you'll have in mind the Bohr model of the atoms, which is you have a nuclei, the core of the atom, and electrons spinning around. That's the main image we have in mind. And it's a convenient image, but we know it's wrong. The electron does not just turn around the nucleus. You have probability of presence. You don't really know where the electron is. You know it's mostly here, mostly there. So we have no way to figure out what's the exact motion of that electrons. But the Bohr model helps still, even though it's wrong, it's still useful. It's useful because it provides a convenient image of the atom. If you imagine the core and the electron around, it looks like a solar system with the sun and the planets around. Something that you know. You know what the solar system looks like. You've learned it. You're accustomed to it. It becomes intuitive. So similarly, when you look at the atoms, like, oh, okay, it would make sense. You have the core of the atom and the electron that turns around, like a small-scale solar system. It's a convenient image again, but it's not right. It's not the truth. We know there's better. We have better approximations. Interestingly, here, by acknowledging that different theories can appropriately describe the same object but in different contexts, one is implicitly trading between precision and utility, between truth and usefulness. And if precision can be equated with truth, that means one is living at one's convenience in different levels of truth. So to relate this idea of living in different levels of truth to religion, it's like acknowledging that Allah is in control of everything, but I still do my own actions. Like I know the truth that Allah has control. Allah can do whatever He wants. But then in practice, in my own context, in my everyday life, I still take the means to achieve a goal. I still do the first step. So accordingly, a theory like Newton's law, for example, even if we know it's deficient, it's not perfect, it's still appreciated today because it serves the needs of a society that does not require a greater degree of precision. We scientists are thus dealing with different theories, different explanations, or different facets of the same truth, each being valid depending on what we are trying to study. Another example to make it more concrete. If you look at the duality of light, you can understand light either as a wave or as a particle, depending on the phenomenon you're trying to explain, depending on which interaction you want to study between the light and something else. In short, when a choice must be made between multiple theories, it is the theory that is most useful that is retained. Oftentimes. We have discussed previously the scientific relevance of a theory, and the utility discussed here is part of that relevance in a sense. By dedicating a section specifically to the utility, to the usefulness of a theory, I want to emphasize that in the final analysis, it is the practice of a theory that gives its ultimate value. The more a theory is applicable, the more benefits you can derive from it in our daily lives, the more it will be valued. Recall the example of Kepler, who made heliocentrism work the same way you can make Islam work. You have to seek the benefits, you have to make it practical, applicable, and it works. So to summarize here, in summary, the acceptance of a theory passes first through an evaluation of its origin. In this aim, it is the person's credibility that will be key. You need to trust the source. Once confidence in the spokesperson is established, be it a theorist, a teacher, a journalist who convey a message, the next step is to evaluate the theory's relevance to past and present observation. You have to make sense of that new worldview in your context. The better the description, while remaining scientifically logical and simple, the closer you assume it is to the truth. But in the scientific realm, beyond precision of a theory, beyond its truthfulness, it is also its usefulness that is given priority. Ideally, both precision and usefulness should coincide. But in practice, it is the usefulness of a theory that gives its ultimate value. To make that idea more real, more concrete, in the Islamic paradigm, it's like if you're wondering, you're asking whether you live in an occasionalist world or a causal world. And I would say such questions are interesting, philosophically interesting, but for the layperson, you don't need to know. You don't need to know how Allah works. You know that Allah is in control, and that's it. How is He in control, subhanahu wa ta'ala? It doesn't matter. For the vast majority of us people, that question is quite irrelevant. if it does not have practical implications, it will be dismissed, like the theory of relativity initially when it was formulated in 1905. To originate from a trustable source, to be scientifically relevant, and more specifically, to be useful, are thus the primary criteria that a theory needs to fulfill in order to be taken into account and then validated. I will now turn to religion, to Islam, to discuss how the worldview promoted by Islam, which I like to call the Islamic paradigm, fulfills the same criteria. وجزاك الله خيرا والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.